I forget the other guy, but took them up to various places where he was having contact. Same thing with Moses. He went up on the hill and they were, all the lightning. And I want to make something clear first. When Moses exited Egypt, to be called, to kind of the starting of the, quote, Jewish race, all you had to do was to believe in the one God. There were many different races. You weren't just Semitic. That's a myth and a lie that's been promulgated by the Zionists, which, if you go into the history of, and I'm not anti-Semitic, I'm not anti-Catholic, I'm not anti-Christian, I'm not anti-Muslim or anything, but the true history is that some of these negative extraterrestrials descended in the time of Rome, and they took over, they influenced certain elements of the surface society, and they actually took over some places in, I think it's Kazakhstan, and they were called Khazarian Jews, and they weren't Jewish or didn't follow the faith, but it was during the wars between the Catholics and the Muslims in the Middle East. The Muslims would come in and go, "Are you Catholics?" And they go, "No." I go, "Well, are you Muslims?" "No, but we're Jewish." And then so the Christians would come down and go, "Oh, like this." So they kind of worked out the thing there. So what happened is there's a bunch of individuals, and it's the same thing in any criminal enterprise. It doesn't matter if you're Italian, if you're white American, you're Swiss. There's a lot of criminal elements, and they decided to work the system to claim that they were the chosen people. And the chosen people choose themselves. There's no one race that's going to be chosen by God. You choose yourself by your actions and your adherence to God's will. Now, not every Catholic person is involved with the Vatican. There's a lot of ignorance in there, and there's a lot of faithful people that are following certain information based on faith, and they're innocent and sincere. The same thing. And I have a lot of Jewish friends, absolutely beautiful, wonderful, loving people. Unfortunately, there is an element, just like there is in the U.S. Congress or in the mafia or anything. There's an element that is pretty wrapped up in their own belief system, that they are the chosen. And the people in Palestine have more Semitic blood than the people in Israel, and they've taken their land. They got it was never ratified by the United Nations, but they went into Israel with tanks, said this is our area, and it was a little area, and now it's expanded, and it's just creating tension. And it's actually run by this hostile other group of extraterrestrials that are manipulating the politics of the world. They want to create a world war because they want to destroy the human population. So with that negative group out there, we also have the positive groups. And if we don't pay attention to that negativity, we find solutions, and we reach across our hands to our brothers and sisters in Israel and in Palestine and wherever around the world, we can find common ground and realize that we're all brothers and sisters. Now the Dead Sea Scrolls, which is now under control with the Jewish authorities, they have a big building, and they had all the people, they had 250 translators who started seeing UFO contacts, and the ancient history of these records were bought out, and the Jewish authorities didn't like it. So they fired 250 translators, and they put it under lock and key. And Dr. Frank Stranges was given the information from Valiant Thor of the truth of what happened in the past and the history, and they called him and said, "You should be put to death." So there's a lot of negative people trying to block this information of the true history of the earth. Let's go to the Jesuits. The Jesuits went into Egypt, And for 20 years, they had an army of Jesuits just chipping away. I've been there. I've been to Luxor. I've been to Karnak. I've been to these locations. And they've chipped away all the ancient records of the hieroglyphs because they don't want you to know the truth of the history of the extraterrestrial information. Now, in the Rig Rajur and the Samvedas, they talk about the rishis. And these are the ancient texts of spiritual hymns or messages from the rishis talking about the relationship with God, and those are the Pleiadians. The Bible, the Quran, the Buddhist texts, the Book of Mormon, the Mahabharata, all have references to interactions. This is the cover of the Mormon Bible. Joseph Moroni, hello, there's a little spaceship up there, isn't it? Okay, and here's a sheep going, I know the guy and the sheep are working together. And they go, for God's sakes, stop it with the conspiracy stuff. But we're kept in ignorance by misdirection. There's a giant Egyptian being. And all those giant Egyptian statues, some of the beings were that large. Look at the size of those skulls. Here, boy. Fetch. Okay. So here you see the Egyptians. And one of the things that you'll find from the building of the pyramids, you see these pictures of two pharaohs with the big head, or the two beings with the big heads, and they're holding an ankh. And there's just two guys guiding these giant stones. And that's how they did it. The Atlanteans were an extraterrestrial race, or at least the ones that came to Egypt at that point in time. And they had a little copper thing up on their nose, and you can actually see it. But they put a thing that would do a copper mist because they need copper. And the ankh was a technology that, with a connection to the advanced person holding the ankh, that they could raise a stone and they could make it any weight they want. So he could hold that stone, and there was another guy, two guys could just take a giant stone and just push it along. He would just hold it, it was like levitated. So that's how the Great Pyramids or some of these other pyramids were also built. There's Buzz Aldrin. I went to school with his stepdaughter. There he is on the moon, and they got menaced off the moon. So there are multiple bases of not only the bad guys in the trapezoid that Tony talked about, but there are Venusian bases, there's Cardassian bases, there are multiple bases, and it's considered neutral territory. And they're all allegedly following these treaties that they have about interaction with us. And the jig is up now. Higher galactic forces have come in and told them, all right, experiment's over. You people in charge of the Earth, you need to stop the money system. It's ridiculous. You're going to have to tell your people you need you're going to release free energy. You're going to do this, this, and this. And the reptilians were included and said, let us go. And the galactic forces says, no, you stay here. You can't put this barrier around the entire solar system. They can't get out. And they're closing it and closing it down. Tony's information is there's probably some of these programs still going on. We're not sure yet. We don't know exactly what's going on. But some of these outer space bases, these millions of people on Mars, on Sirius, we even have a lunar operation command of guys that have been involved in a lot of negative stuff throughout the galaxy, and of course you have the Dark Fleet. So we don't know exactly what's happening right now, but it may be possible that these beings are being taken up for healing. All the people like Tony who've been suffering in those programs, there may be an arrest process going on within the solar system and bringing it down to the time of hopefully this cleansing on Earth. And according to some sources, at the moment of this solar flash, these negative beings will be repelled and kept out of the solar system, those that are already outside and trying to come in for 1,000 years. Now, I've talked to Cosmic Ray. I talked to him last night and asked him a few questions, and he said that in the year 2094 is a very important time. There's going to be something happening here on Earth that's going to lead us to something positive. And he said in the year 3000, the Earth and Venus are very much alike. There's going to be we're going to raise to a higher vibration. A lot of us, we want to think everything's happening. Oh, we're ascending the planet, boom! Things move slow. I'd like to believe that, and anything is possible with the Creator. I mean, sky can become earth and the earth becomes sky. We are kind of limited in our feelings and our understandings of what really is taking place and going on. And as you have with Sue, in her stories, and she had the feelings, and I burped, and my friend, and her story was fragmented. And this does not make it untrue. This is a higher dimensional information that we don't have explanations for or abilities to relate to. And there are some other information going on right now with a contact to a giant complex beneath the Brusigi Mountains in Romania. And there's a giant galactic repository of information with a very high technology that the Americans and the Romanians went into. And they've got vehicles in there with the supertonic boring machines, and this thing leads to Iraq, it leads to Egypt, and it leads to Iraq and Egypt and Tibet. And there's another tunnel that goes directly to an inner Earth civilization. Now they have their military guys, but they can't get in. They have to go with the permission of the highly spiritual guides that the ETs are letting them run the mission. So they're under that control, and that's a guy named Radu Sinamar. And I recommend you read that. I'm talking with Peter Moon, who was very involved in writing books with Preston Nichols and the Montauk Project and all that kind of stuff. So there's some exciting stuff, and this guy was going through experiences. The way you read the book, it's just like Sue. I had feelings. The portal, time and space was impinging on itself, and he went through these experiences, and guess what? He's walking in the mountains. He was guided by a Tibetan monk and another immortal being. I think I talked about some of the alchemical transmutation, the information that this guy was getting. So there's two guys, and they grabbed this psychic from Romania who had a unique birth that was bought into Project Zero, they called it, on Romania. And only Nicolae Ceausescu and one general even knew about it. And this guy was in charge of it, kind of ordained for this program. And he's walking in the mountains. Next thing, they're in a time portal, time and space, and boom, they're in Tibet. Now, they find this giant mountain. He goes inside and he meets this blue woman. Did I talk about that yesterday? Okay. So, and she's called Marchandi. Now, she was the servant of Rama and Sita about 9,000 years ago. And the story of Rama and Sita actually takes place in Romania, we hear. So there's some wild stuff going on here. And when he's in her presence, he's like, oh, and I've heard this before in certain texts, you become totally enamored because of spiritual vibration. She's a deity, they call them that in Tibetan, but she's a high being. She's in charge of a giant quadrant of this arm of the galaxy. She's a very high spiritual being. And her presence coming near him, she goes, oh, you're having mental problems assimilating it, kind of like Sue was like, not all that stuff. So she touches him, and he becomes more grounded and grows in his spiritual growth. And there's a lot of books, I haven't gone into it, just mind-blowing. But he was given text to translate, and it's the keys to enlightenment from Padmasambhava, also known as Guru Rinpoche. So these actual texts of the Meditations for Enlightenment are now available for you to read. And intellectual knowledge isn't always the way to go, but there's some disciplines and practices that I'm looking forward to getting those books. So there we got kicked off the moon. Not the Nazis or the Solar Warden, it had to be secret, but they didn't want America or the people on the Earth figuring out that there's stuff going on in outer space, and there's a base in the rover there. And I talked about this as a government secret space program where they crashed the disk in the snow. The government military guys, how many guys are up here? And they're keeping it secret. Well, they found a US government secret disk. They went up there before the Russians. They looked at it and they said, let's just blow the mofo up. We can't recover it. So here's some of the secret space program technology. There's HARP, part of the mind control. This all came from, this is the Philadelphia experiment. And I actually have pictures of the ship going invisible in various phases, but this is on board the craft, and this is what happened. They kind of opened up a rift in time and space. Now there was two scientists, Tesla and Einstein, that were involved in this experiment, and they both told the government, look, this is unsafe, we can't do this experiment. The government was pushing and pushing for invisibility to, gain technological advantage. They were always into technology. They want the advantage to oppress the other people, like raids, squishing ants. Who's got the best nozzle? So a guy named von Neumann said, I'll do it. And so they pushed forward, and of course, many of the guys on the ship being in close proximity to these exotic magnetic fields that were running amok, they found themselves like half in the ship metal and stuff, and they actually went and destroyed the machine. Some guys, and you can probably read about that in the Montauk experiment, but that was how the government kind of got introduced into time travel and into some of these exotic information which they've been stealing. Now this is a HARP program, and if you look back there, can you hold up that cup there? Would you hold that cup up for people? Okay, that's a shape. Now you look over here on the right-hand part of the screen here. There's actually one of those is a sound horn, and they're using high-frequency sounds to create this artificial black hole, and that's in Alaska, kind of like the Eye of Mordor. But that's all the negative stuff. They're using pyramids. That's a HARP program. Now we go into the mind control. This girl in the center was a mind control subject. She was one of the first presidential models after Marilyn Monroe, using the Nazi mind control technology. And what they found in the death camps was Mengele was torturing people, and they'd get tortured so much that they would create an altar. And when the torture was over, they'd have to forget it because it was too traumatic. So you could create split personalities through this technology. And it's advanced now. They use kind of like it's more like an orgasm beam now that's more like a friendly thing. But this woman at the age of 14 was taken to the salt talks by Henry Kissinger, who's a full-blown reptilian. And he touched her hand, and she would recite things. She's photographic memory. Kennedy was a good guy, but she had sex with every president since Kennedy up to Reagan, well, including Bush's, but except for Jimmy Carter. So she was used by them to transfer information. She ran drugs. She could swim a mile, in icy cold water. She's like a super soldier woman, and she would have these sex programs. Bob Hope thought that he owned her, but it was really owned by Henry Kissinger. Just like he said that billionaire, there's someone else. Kissinger was using her because she was very advanced. She was helped out of her programming by Ted Gunderson, an FBI agent, and a hitman who was forced into one of the military's operations when they wanted to bring Cambodia in the war, and that's a long story. I don't want to get into that. There's a HARP program. This is an underground base. That's the tunnel opening up like James Bond. There's a machine gun nest. This is a Nazi base. This is one of the secret space programs called the Aurora. That's this ultimate surveillance drone. It looks in, it can do anything. It's made to look like an alien, but it's government technology. This is S4, the new area. That's Area 51 is obsolete. Too many people know about it, but they have giant mountains Utah now, where they have huge space programs going out. This is part of a black hole technology created by the HARP. But if we can use this technology for good, we can create an era of prosperity and abundance. So we have to get ready for the wonderful future for humanity that's unfolding, and will take place as rapidly as possible, as fast so we can assimilate the negative agendas and move forward with our own creation of solutions. Let's stop waiting for the government and create positive, intentional communities and right relationships with each other. We got to arrest these guys. Yeah. Now, I'm going to get into George Bush here. Now, you see Hitler with Scorzini. That's Hitler in the blue shirt. He died in 1993. And look at those guys. There's George Scherf. He was a Nazi. I'm going to show you his picture. We're not your slaves, you know. And of course, the police, that's why they never convict a policeman in America, because if they do, those guys won't go forward with their just bully you and kill you. I mean, it's horrible. They're taking, you know, you know the story. They sit on a black guy, they got him down, and they just shoot him right in the chest. I mean, they're designing programs. They put a lot of neo-Nazi Aryan supremacists in the police department to create race wars. It keeps people fighting against each other. And it's like a normal war. Anyway, I want to go into that. Here we go. I do want to show this. Well, I got a better laser here, don't I? So I want to show you the things here. I think I showed this yesterday. That's Barbara Walker Bush. That's Joseph Mengele. That's George Bush Sr., known as George Scherf here. And if you look at this picture, you can kind of see he's related to him. It looks more like George Bush than this one, but that's George Bush. There's Hitler's bodyguard. That's Ralph, and that's Martin Bormann. And I don't know who those little girls are. But that's the picture in 1938. So Operation Paperclip, the CIA, America's being run by the Fourth Reich. Okay, so we go to personal contactees. That's Dr. Frank Stranges, who went on board Victor 1. And believe it or not, that's me before I lost weight. There's my friend, Dr. Fred Bell, who I met at an early age and shared this pyramid technology with me. And that is the interstellar time conversion spaceship that he was able to work with the Pleiades. And this device here is called the X1 healing machine. And that's part of time travel. When you get into these high frequency healing devices, they put this thing is a cathode ray tube, and they put it over you. And that's what the King's Chamber was. It's not a sarcophagus for a dead person. That was actually a tub that was filled with pH balanced water, and this machine would go over you and revitalize and make you more or less immortal, or restore your DNA to its original pristine content. And over time, you can become like a 20-year-old kid. So he had a lot of technology. I go, why can't we do it? Because it's not time yet. It's not time yet. And it wasn't really not about being time. He could do it, but people weren't ready for it. This technology would be harassed. Alex Collier was a hero. This is the guy that invited me out into the desert. I talked about the military guy that was sent to me to teach me stuff yesterday. Gabriel Green called me on the phone and it rang really loud. Do you remember that story? If you remember that, raise your hand. Okay, so when I was younger, 22, I was working as a massage therapist in Palm Springs, and Gabriel Green called me and said, Master Hilarian's sending a teacher for you. I said, who is it? He goes, I don't know. We'll find out, but come on up. I hung up the phone, and the ETs put a beam on it, and it rang really loud, like a fire alarm on steroids. So that was so I wouldn't go blow him off and go out and smoke a doobie and meet a girl that night. I was going up to his house, and so, because I was young, and this military guy who worked in an underground abduction base had a car accident, broke his mind control, and worked with the Greys abducting, and he said, I'm not doing this anymore. He told the government, I'm not doing it. And they said, you're going to jail. And the Pleiadians came in, a woman came in right before he was to be shipped out to Leavenworth. She put her hand over the lock. All the guys, the military MPs, fell asleep. One of them was standing up. It was like a hand pushed him up against the wall and gently slid him down in his gun and his helmet. And she stepped over. The guy goes, "We like the way you think. We're going to help you." And she says, "Follow me. Come quickly." And she opened the door. And I said, "Well, you're standing here now. You took option B and followed." And I swear this is what he said. It was a hot blonde chick with a nice rack and a silver spacesuit. And so I go, "Really?" So he got to the door, and she turns back and goes, "Come quickly." And it was starting to snow outside, and she went to the corner of the building again and goes, "We'll meet again soon, follow the light." And he goes, "Wait a minute, meet again soon? You just broken me out of a gray base. The security on here is so tight. I mean, what are you thinking?" So he gets to the corner, her footprints disappeared, but there was a little blue golf ball sized flashlight that led him out through security. And I go, "What do you do?" He goes, "I work as a messenger for the forces of light, and I'm here for the victory of the light, and you're going to be sharing some information in the future. And so I'm here to clue you in." And he showed me about artificial intelligence, parasitic plasma, astral entities that feed back and suck on our auras, and that vampiric stuff is kind of out there, but you know, there's different ways as you understand your aura and take control of your thoughts. Your thoughts, you're the captain of your ship. Do not listen to programming. Enter into the silence, the sacredness. Invoke the power and the light of God into yourself, and you can move forward. So Gabriel Green actually was Abraham Lincoln in a previous lifetime. And it was Abe in 1860, and he ran in 1960. And he gave his electoral votes to Kennedy, and that turned the tide. There was other things in the mafia, but and there's Omnic Dominic. She's coming at my conference, and her story is that she came from Venus. She lived on the interior, on the astral plane. The masters asked her to come here to find out about physical conditions of someone on the astral plane. She had a karmic relationship with a little girl. When that girl died in a bus accident that they knew was happening, her uncle, a Venusian, and a Martian guy that was on the Earth, and her in the back seat, they ran out and got the girl, took her out of the car, put her in the trunk, and Omnic took her place. And she's written some 3 books. This is Sir George King, a yogi, and now that's what the Ayargans look like. That's from Wendell Stevens' book. I'm really related to this book. Look it up, UFO Contact from Ayarga, and I think it's on a Bibliopedia site. You can see certain information there, but it talks about their lifestyle, the harmony, how they live, and their technology, how they have a beautiful, clean, pure planet. And they go, "You think your planet is overwrought with people? Compared to you, we have very little land and like twice as many people in the space, but they're so efficient, they're so loving, and they get along, so they all live in these like little boxes." There's Dr. Frank Strange's. I'm going to talk about the Akashic Records. I talked about that he saw various things. And there's George Adamski and Orthon. And the being was actually a female. And her name is Lady Orda. And I showed you her picture, and you're going to see it again. So that was a Lady Orda. This is just being revealed now in the last 6 months by Cosmic Ray, who's written these 2 books. And there's a mad story I'm going to tell you here. There's Howard and Connie Mencher, the contactees from Highbridge, New Jersey. These are some of the ancient, or not ancient, but beginning of the UFO lore, the modern day contactee movement. And they have a great story. I took them to Egypt in 1991 at what was called the 1111 frequency change. I did a conference there. This is a picture of Howard in his Saturnian light form. And there's also a picture of the lady on the rock. That's how she appeared. Okay, so there's his second wife, Connie Mencher, who was the sister of the being that appeared to Howard on the rock and spoke lovingly to him. And you can look up Howard Menger and research that story. I recommend you get those books from Cosmic Ray, his excellent Venus Adventure. But he's got like a bunch of other books. One's called Venus Rising, and the other one's called Rockets to Venus. And he goes into details about all the information about life on Venus and so forth. Did I tell you that she came to him in China and took him to an ascension party on Venus?
Yes.
Okay, so she took him in the orb. They landed in the Tibetan plateau, and one of the